There's something no one told you, something that explains why your loyalty, your honesty, and your long, heartfelt messages never changed anything. You were doing everything right, staying committed, showing up every day, checking in, making sure she knew how much she meant to you. And yet, she pulled away, grew distant. And now you're left wondering what went wrong. Today you're going to understand why it wasn't your efforts that failed. It was the way you gave them. If you've ever felt invisible in love, overlooked despite your dedication, or taken for granted no matter how much you tried, then this message is exactly what you need. What you'll hear in the next few moments could be the turning point, not just for your relationships, but for your entire life. You think your words matter? They don't. Not the long texts, not the voice notes, not the promises you rehearse over and over. She doesn't respect what you say. She respects what she feels when you stop saying anything at all. When you stop showing up with explanations, justifications, and emotional performances. That's when something shifts. The illusion of words. There's a common belief that if you just say the right things, express your heart with enough depth and detail, she will finally understand. That if you explain your intentions clearly, if you open yourself up and show her your sincerity, if you admit your flaws and make promises to grow, she will finally see your worth and choose to stay. And so, you send the long texts. You pour out your heart at 2 a.m., carefully typing every word, hoping that this time, something lands. You explain the silence, the tension, the mistakes. You voice note your pain, your longing, your devotion. You share your dreams, your fears, your loyalty. You think that vulnerability will unlock a door that's been slowly closing. But instead of hearing the weight of your words, she skims through them. Maybe she responds with a short, "Thank you." Maybe she sends a heart emoji. Maybe she says she understands. And for a moment, you breathe. You believe you've reached her. But deep down, you feel it. Nothing has changed. Because words, no matter how heartfelt, are not enough to shift emotional energy. They might touch the mind for a moment, but they rarely penetrate the soul unless the energy behind them demands to be felt. And the truth is, when your energy is chasing her, when your presence is still clinging to her emotionally, when you're trying to be heard louder instead of stepping away with quiet strength, she doesn't feel your value. She senses your need. And no matter how kind she may be, that neediness creates an imbalance. It's not the words that reveal your worth, it's your absence. When you step away, fully, not halfway, not while secretly watching her stories or waiting for her to reach out, you create a vacuum, not out of spite, not to manipulate, but because you recognize that your peace matters more than proving yourself. In that space, your silence becomes deafening. Suddenly, she's not scrolling through your messages. She's noticing the lack of them. She's not weighing your words. She's feeling the space they once occupied. That void is not empty. It's full of meaning. It's full of the emotional presence you once gave freely. It's filled with the energy that used to chase, to explain, to convince. And it's in that absence that your true value is finally felt. Because absence is not just the lack of words, it's the presence of clarity. It tells her, without saying a thing, that you are no longer begging to be seen, that you are no longer offering your soul as a pitch for approval, that you have stepped back not in anger, but in respect for yourself. It speaks louder than 1,000 messages, louder than a dozen apologies, louder than any late-night call trying to explain why you still care. Because in a world that constantly tries to speak louder to be heard, the one who becomes silent often becomes the most unforgettable. This is where the illusion of words collapses. This is where you realize that trying harder won't make her feel what she's no longer open to receiving. And when you stop trying, not out of bitterness, but out of self-recognition, you stop leaking energy into someone who cannot feel your worth. You pull your power back. You hold your peace like a flame. And in doing so, you teach her something no message ever could, that your presence was not a given, that your love was not infinite, that your efforts were not an obligation, and most importantly, that your silence now is not emptiness, it is a boundary, it is your final truth. You made the shift happens. When you detach, detachment is often misunderstood. People think it means coldness or apathy. They think it means giving up. But true detachment, conscious detachment, is none of those things. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you stop begging to be cared for. It's the deliberate decision to stop bleeding for someone who won't even offer a bandage. It's recognizing that your peace, your sanity, your emotional balance are not things you can continue to compromise just to hold on to someone who treats your presence like background noise. You detach not because you're bitter. You detach because your soul finally whispers loud enough that you hear it. You deserve better than this. Detachment is not done in anger. It's not about proving a point. It is done in stillness, in clarity, in the sacred return to yourself. It's the quiet courage of choosing peace over chaos, even if that peace comes with loneliness. It's not a power move to make her chase you. It's a power move to no longer chase her. Because the man who chases is driven by fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being forgotten, fear of not being enough. But the man who stands still, who removes his energy and redirects it into his own growth, into his own healing, into his own purpose, that man becomes untouchable. Not because he closes off, but because he opens up to himself first. And in doing so, something shifts. Deeply, radically, energetically. You go from being reactive to being grounded. You stop answering every emotional text. You stop explaining every little feeling. You stop showing up just to prove you care. Instead, you start moving differently. Your schedule becomes tighter, not because you're pretending to be busy, but because you actually are. Your workouts become non-negotiable. Your goals become personal contracts. You no longer look at your phone wondering if she'll reply. You're too focused on becoming the kind of man who no longer needs a reply to feel valid. And here's the part no one tells you. When you do this, not with bitterness, not with ego, but with true self-respect, the energy shifts so profoundly that she feels it, not hears it, not reads it, feels it. The same woman who felt safe knowing you'd always be there starts to wonder where that certainty went. She starts to notice the silence, not because it's empty, but because it's full of strength. It's full of grounded presence. She begins to realize that your presence was never owed, that your love was never guaranteed, that the man she once saw as someone always willing to fix things is no longer available to be fixed. And that's when the dynamic flips. That's when the shift truly happens. You're no longer orbiting around her emotions. You're not watching her moods and adjusting yours. You're not trying to decode mixed signals, not twisting yourself into knots trying to understand where she's coming from. You've stopped being a mirror for her indecision. You've become a mountain, still, centered, immovable. She can approach or retreat, but it no longer changes the shape of your day, your mind, or your heart. This is the moment when you return to yourself, when you stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "What am I meant to build next?" When you stop scrolling through old messages and start journaling your next steps. When you stop pacing in circles and start walking your path. It's not glamorous, it's not always easy, it's lonely at times, but it's real, it's free. And it's the beginning of you becoming a man no longer ruled by external affection, but led by internal direction. And that's when your power returns. Not because you took it from anyone else, but because you finally stopped giving it away. Detachment is not rejection, it's self-respect. Detachment in its purest form is one of the most misunderstood and yet most powerful expressions of self-respect a man can embody. Many confuse detachment with cruelty, thinking it means cutting someone off to cause them pain. They see it as a punishment, a cold, calculated decision to withdraw affection, to manipulate someone into chasing. But detachment is not about hurting the other person. It's not about making them miss you just so you can feel wanted again. That's not strength. That's insecurity disguised as power. True detachment comes from a place far deeper. It comes from recognizing that staying in a situation that no longer aligns with your peace, your values, or your purpose is no longer an act of love. It's an act of self-betrayal. When you detach, you're not rejecting her. You're choosing to protect your soul from continual erosion. You're choosing to stop begging for basic things like clarity, consistency, and respect. And you don't do this with anger. You don't slam doors. You don't give dramatic speeches. You don't try to make a point. You simply walk away, quietly, steadily, and without apology. Because when something doesn't nourish you anymore, staying becomes a slow death. It's not sustainable. It drains you emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And when you reach that breaking point, not because she left, but because you left yourself behind trying to please her, you finally realize that withdrawal isn't rejection. It's the highest form of honoring your own worth. You don't owe explanations for every boundary you set. You don't need to broadcast your departure. People who didn't notice your presence while you were there won't truly hear your reasons when you're gone. So, instead of trying to explain your decision, you let your silence carry the weight. And silence, when delivered with intention, can echo louder than any emotional outburst ever could. It's not the absence of noise, it's the presence of self-assurance. It says, I know what I bring. I don't need to beg you to see it. That kind of silence shakes people. It unsettles them. It forces them to confront what they took for granted. Your calmness becomes tension. Your stillness becomes a mystery. And in that space of not knowing where they stand anymore, they're left alone with the echo of your absence. That silence, that non-reaction, that detachment. It's magnetic. Because most people are used to being chased. They're used to being argued with, reasoned with, pleaded with. They're used to having control over someone's emotional state. So, when you respond with nothing but peace, when you simply choose not to fight for a place in their life anymore, it disrupts the pattern they expected. They look for your reaction, your explanation, your pain, and when they find only stillness, they begin to reflect. Not because you asked them to, but because your absence has created a vacuum where once there was your constant effort. This is where the dynamic shifts, not because you manipulated her emotions, but because you reclaimed your own. You stopped being the man who bends to keep someone comfortable. You stopped being the emotional safety net. You stopped overextending to avoid confrontation. Instead, you became the man who honors his own standards. You stood up not with raised fists, but with raised awareness. You realized that the most respectful thing you can do, both for her and for yourself, is to leave when your presence is no longer appreciated. And what happens next isn't always predictable. Sometimes she comes back, awakened by the weight of your absence. Sometimes she doesn't. But by then, you're not waiting anymore. You're not watching the door. You've shifted the focus. You've turned your energy inward. You've begun building the life you paused while trying to fix someone else's confusion. You've returned to your center. And in doing so, you've reclaimed something far more valuable than attention. You've reclaimed your dignity. A Stoic man doesn't explain his boundaries endlessly. He doesn't announce his worth on repeat. He doesn't beg for attention. He knows what he brings. He knows that emotional validation isn't a currency he needs to survive. And because of that, he stands tall even when alone. His detachment isn't a weapon, it's a shield, a quiet protection of the sacred space within him that no longer tolerates emotional instability as a norm. And this, ironically, is what makes him so deeply attractive, not just to women, but to life itself. Because when you stop leaking energy into places that do not reciprocate, that energy flows back into you. It builds you, it grounds you, it transforms you. And you walk through the world not with need, but with presence. And presence, when it's born from self-respect, is the most powerful force a man can carry. You become magnetic. When you choose yourself, there's something transformative, almost alchemical, that happens when a man finally chooses himself. Not from a place of arrogance or revenge, but from an awakening that whispers, you've given enough. He's tired, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally, of trying to be enough for someone who only notices his presence when it's convenient. He starts to realize that his constant availability, his eagerness to please, his willingness to bend, explain, justify, accommodate, it has only made him invisible, and the more he gave, the more he disappeared. Until one day, something inside breaks, not with loud drama, but with quiet truth. He looks in the mirror and sees a man who's been slowly sacrificing his essence for approval, and he decides, in that stillness, that the cycle ends now. He stops explaining, he stops chasing, he stops filling in the silence, not to prove anything to her, but because he's finally ready to listen to himself. He doesn't need to be loud about it, he doesn't need to announce it. His shift isn't broadcasted on social media or shouted in passive-aggressive texts. It's internal, it's deep, and it's permanent. He starts choosing silence, not as a weapon, but as a shield. He no longer needs to correct the narrative or defend his position. He no longer needs to be understood by someone who hasn't been listening. He simply moves forward, and with every step, something powerful happens. His energy comes back. The same energy he spent overthinking, checking messages, analyzing tone, replaying conversations. That energy now flows into himself. He picks up that book he'd been meaning to read. He starts hitting the gym, not out of spite, but because he remembers how good it feels to be strong. Not just physically, but mentally. He refocuses on his craft, on his vision, on his circle of influence. He reconnects with the things that bring him peace. His life starts filling up, not with distractions, but with purpose. He doesn't ghost people, he evolves. And not everyone is meant to come with him. That's the point. He no longer tries to squeeze himself into spaces where he's only tolerated. He builds his own space. He expands his world until it's so full of meaning, he forgets why he ever made someone else the center of it. And ironically, it's in that exact moment, when he detaches, when he reclaims his energy, when he stops explaining, that she starts to feel the absence. Not just the physical absence of texts or calls, but the energetic absence of someone who once orbited her every mood. She notices that something has shifted. The predictability she once took for granted is gone. The man who used to drop everything to make her feel safe, who used to check in when she grew distant, who used to seek reassurance and over-deliver, he's no longer playing that role. And that creates a void, not an empty void, but a powerful one. A presence that now belongs to him, not to her. Suddenly, he isn't easy to reach anymore, not because he's playing games, but because he's busy becoming. She finds herself thinking, wondering, sensing something she didn't before. Distance, not born from bitterness, but from evolution. It's the distance that says, I love myself more than I need your inconsistent attention. That kind of energy is magnetic, not because it seeks to attract, but because it stands on its own. There's nothing more captivating than a man who doesn't need to prove his value. He's already living it, he's already embodying it. And whether she comes back or not, no longer matters, because the man she'd returned to is no longer the man who once waited. He's not colder, he's clearer, he's not distant, he's disciplined. He doesn't need her presence to validate his identity anymore, because now he walks with purpose. He doesn't chase closure, he doesn't need answers. He stopped making someone else the judge of his worth. And in doing so, he's unlocked something rare, a quiet, undeniable confidence. It's not loud, it doesn't beg to be seen, but it radiates in the way he moves, the way he speaks, the way he no longer reacts. His calmness says what his words never could. I am no longer available for anything that costs me my peace. And she feels it. She senses that she no longer has unrestricted access to the man who once gave without limit. That door is no longer open. And not because it was slammed shut, but because he outgrew the need to leave it open for someone who never fully walked through it. Respect doesn't begin when you start giving more. It doesn't begin when you double your efforts to be heard, seen, or chosen. It doesn't come from pouring every drop of your time, affection, and presence into someone who treats you as an option. No matter how pure your intentions are, respect isn't born out of sacrifice alone, especially when that sacrifice comes at the cost of your own well-being. The real beginning of respect starts the moment you realize you no longer need to be validated by someone else to know your own worth. It begins not with another text sent, not with another attempt to explain yourself, but in the silence where you choose peace over performance. It starts when you finally understand that your time, your energy, and your heart are not gifts to be given without discernment. They are sacred resources, and when you learn to protect them, you begin to command a different kind of presence, one that speaks louder than your voice ever could.